studios really need to look around and say, wow, geez, there are way too many white men in this room.
Latinx and Hispanic superheroes have fought in the pages of American comics for almost as long as comics themselves have existed. DC Comics introduced El Castigo, which was incorrectly translated as the Whip. Catwoman, created in the 1940s, was later identified as half Cuban, and Marvel developed White Tiger in the 70s. But there were plenty of characters by other publishers designed in between. In the 21st century, we've seen more Latinx stars take the spotlight, both on the page and on the big screen. The character Miles Morales got his own movie, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, in 2018. And Dominican actor Zoe Saldana played Gamora in the Guardians of the Galaxy films. But comic book creators believe there's a lot more to be done. Edgardo Miranda-Rodriguez and Vita Ayala are two artists bringing the stories of their people into the superhero universe.
We need more inclusive representation across the board. You know, one of the things that is important to me as a writer is to create stories that I personally would have wanted to read when I was at various ages, right? It is the experience of many queer people to feel invisible. I really want to write things where it's like, no, you can do whatever. You could be a good guy, you could be a bad guy, you could be in the middle, like any of those things. You are the hero of your own story. I think that it is equally important for people of color to see themselves as nuanced people. We have this weird notion in this country that the target audience is like straight, cis, white dudes, but those people make up a very small amount of the population.
It was about 82 years ago when Superman was created, which would kind of push that white male narrative forward and continues to be the majority of the stories that are told in comic book and film. We barely have any women on the screen. We barely have people of color on the screens.
Latinx and Hispanic viewers go to the movies more than any other demographic. Yet only 3% of lead or co-lead roles in Hollywood portray these kinds of characters. As for comic books themselves, the representation is abysmal. Creators like Miranda-Rodriguez and Ayala didn't see characters who looked like them in stories, so they crafted stories of their own, and they're using these characters to shine a light on important issues in their communities.
If we're going to really engage people in a discourse around what's happening in Puerto Rico, but more importantly around the conversation of the decolonization of Puerto Rico, we're going to have to enter into the space of popular culture. And what better way to do this than through a superhero? La Borinqueña would become an Afro-Puerto Rican character, an undergraduate student studying environmental sciences. I decided for her to be Afro-Latinx because there's a significant underrepresentation of Afro-Latinos in mainstream media. She stands up for social justice. She proclaims las vidas negras importan. And it's a character that finds itself in a mainstream publishing world that's completely overrun by white male narratives. Not to say that Latins haven't been a part of the comic industry, because we have been, as far back as the 1940s, but it's now that we're starting to see a growing trend of small independent publishers, because we're taking the power of publishing and telling the stories ourselves. We want stories that reflect our experience, that reflect our heritage, that reflect us. And we don't want a studio to say, oh, that's too niche, or no one's gonna get that.
I co-wrote an issue of Supergirl with Steve Orlando, and you know, one of the things that he asked me was, you know, I want you to create a character and to tell a story about, you know, that's personal to you. So I was able to create a non-binary character, Afro-Latinx non-binary person. When people hire me, they kind of know what they're getting, and I make it my business to make things as brown and queer as possible.
Latinxes have been behind the scenes of the comic book industry for decades. Creators are now hoping the fastest growing demographic in America finally gets more time on the pages.
We have stories, we've been telling stories, and whether the studios embrace these stories or not, guess what? We're gonna keep telling these stories.